Let's get to it. Difference coming out this time. Yawn, bored of seeing the Abbasids and the Roos constantly coming out. Instead, go back to a classic of the Delhi, and they're joined by an unorthodox choice in the HRE.
Interesting idea over here. If you think about that, Lipany, recently we have seen a lot of defensive-focused games in this one. And I wonder how much DeMuslim is considering this as like a semi-Hillandale style map with all the cliffs spawning nowadays. We're using the Red Bull Wololo or Road to Wololo version of Lipany, which means that the spawns are a lot more consistent. And so far what we have seen is that cliff spawns are rather common in this map script, unlike the one that is built into the game where you either spawn with a bunch of cliffs or you spawn with none.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I feel like actually if you were going to run HRE for that logic, you'd coin flip the traditional Lipany, right? Because while there are some cliffs, I'd say compared to some of the ridiculous generations you can get on the default map, this is a lot more open. And also another thing to consider is for the HRE, like you need to move beyond your initial resources fairly fast because of how quickly you deplete them. So being kind of stuck condensed behind these choke points can maybe be kind of a double-edged sword in that matchup.
Could indeed be, especially given how exposed both deer patches of DeMuslim are. Both of them on the front, one of them actually behind a forest and a cliff. You could definitely argue for some well-placed walls on the right side especially. Left side is saturated with gold, and you could also think about walling that off. So walling options are there for DeMuslim. The question is whether Wam is going to let him do that or not.
I think this to me is a very HRE favored matchup now. It used to be a little bit different, but considering how quickly the HRE can access castle and how little you can do to stop that, we then get the heal on heal. And DeMuslim knows the heal on heal inside out. Like actually he's one of the most frequent doers of the Knight mass prelate build. It's incredibly effective in this matchup. The advantage that the Delhi are meant to have is the fact that they can heal their units and thus get better bang for buck. But the HRE beat you to castle and are getting that healing as well. All of a sudden, the thing that gives you a potential one-up completely disappears.
Yeah, now, one question is whether Wam will contemplate going for a Tower of Victory, something that we have seen gaining some popularity. I think it was Cauldron where it was quite commonly used. Oh no, I'm confusing two maps. It's Basin that it was used on in some cases.
Yes.
It's a risky call, but we have seen some efficient use of Tower of Victory. Could you see that being a thing here?
I think that is one of the ways forward for the Delhi, but it's not the one that the Canadian bros have been utilizing. Actually, Wam and Puppy Paw have been doing a lot of double TC builds with the still standard choice of the Dome of Faith. So if you want to see the deviation point for them, I think it's going to be in the TC boom, less so in the landmark choice, but I would definitely look to be surprised here. I'd love to be surprised. Sadly, this is not the game for it. It's going to be Dome of Faith.
Indeed. Looks like we are going to have the standard Archon Chapel opening on the northern side. This is a long-term Archon Chapel setup. It's not going to buff most of your immediate eco at the beginning. It is going to help the villagers under the town center, but you don't have a ton of sheep to work with. It's also going to help the gold miners, but it's not really touching the lumberjacks. Maybe if they get close to lumber camp to drop it off, but it's borderline. It's going to be useful for farming in the future, though.
Yeah, and I think it gets the important thing for the Muslim. Like, he wants to be quick castle, and then he wants knights plus prelates. That's a lot of gold. So having your gold line buffed versus your wood is more important here. I actually think it's the correct read. You can't nickel and dime this. There's just no better choice. Like, you could try to go for something next to the wood and the gold to the west, but you never see HRE players build an Archon out of range of the primary TC because they don't want to be forced to build military as well.
Yeah, that's the big point. Like, you need that extra food getter rate. Especially if you're on Rush Castle Age, the biggest limitation you have is food, so you really want to boost your food income as much as possible. Looks like DeMuslim ends up with a decent amount of sheep under the town center. Should be enough for him to get to Castle if he wants to rush it.
And he will be looking to rush it. There are a few players that try to play prolonged feudal. I don't think DeMuslim is one of them, especially in this matchup. Like, DeMuslim, like I said, he's definitely found a new home in the Castle Age Rush. But at the same time, the worst thing you can do against the Delhi as the HRE is play that prolonged feudal, just because the longer it goes on, the more the Delhi benefit.
Big villager pool coming up over here. Might have been just a misclick out there. Oh, yeah. It's going to be a very heavy commitment to it, though. This is not a rush to Castle Age by any means for the Muslim. Could be immediate production buildings or a second TC even.
I think it could be early farm transition. DeMusliMvs one of those players that likes to layer in farms quite early on, just because they very quickly return their value to the HRE Civ specifically. But looks like it's going to be the Rax opening instead. So that's going to offer itself up to more turtly approach this opening. Would be surprised if he extends this too far. I think he definitely wants to be just targeting Castle still.
And this is the second time he mass pulls all the villagers away from the wood line. One has to wonder whether he just misclicked or something else is going on here. Well, it looks like we do have Wam mining some stone here. Possibly a 2TC build or just towers with weapon emplacements.
That's why I said already, it's the 2TC build. Wam and Puppy Paw do it almost every game I watch now. They love this build. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of maps you can do it on. You can do it on Highview, you can do it on Lipany. I haven't seen them try on Dry Arabia, but I think it's just a good build. Like, the Delhi needed something to change, and if you're not willing to experiment with Tower Victory, I think this is the correct way to go, especially considering how easy it is to multi-TC right now.
I think the key point here with the Delhi 2TC is that the opponents will have to take away the sacred sites from you. That is their point of focus, so you can get away with a second TC much easier than you could get away with a second TC using some other civs, because otherwise you play very condensed and your opponents will be focusing on attacking your base. This time around, your opponents will still have to respect the fact that you will have the sacred sites, so they have to focus on those, which means you can easily get away with a second TC.
Sure, I just think with most matchups right now, the Delhi want a second TC. Like, because of that detail you mentioned where you're going to have to deal with the sacred sites first, but it's also something I think we don't give enough credit to is this is, at the end of the day, a Civ that has the same buff the Abbasses have to their food gathering rates, which gives them an insane amount of food. Although they don't get the same discounts the Abbasses do, they do get a high enough gathering rate that they can afford a second TC and to sustain production while building military.
It's also too risky to play 1TC. The thing is that you play 1TC and you lose those sacred sites, suddenly your entire eco collapses. You won't be able to feed more army, you lose map control, you miss out on the berries. So many times you have seen Delhi players falling apart after losing the sacred sites, simply because there is no eco to back it up. Playing 2TC here gives you a slightly slower escalation when it comes to army numbers, but it's going to insulate you from aggression, even if you miss out on some of the sacred sites.
Love this TC placement by Wam.
Beautiful.
Secures the sacred site, secures 3 berry patches nearby as well. Also secures the deer behind him. And he can easily wall across to the north side from the central sacred site to protect that deer area. So much economy secured with this placement.
I was wondering whether he wanted to go for a second TC on a sacred site, but then I saw the man-at-arms and I was like, oh, it's too risky. But it looks like he's just confident the Muslim is paying attention to that middle sacred site. And funnily enough, this might just be a decoy. That entire Volin is just a distraction for the Muslim, screaming, look at me, look at me. And while he's doing that, he's just going to take this down center to the north.
Yeah, I gotta say I'm pleasantly surprised by the Muslims' evolutionary approach to this matchup. I still think his more signature build of this Night Rush with Prelates would be effective here, but he doesn't want to risk Wam having a game, right? If you go for your Castle Age, you're kind of giving Wam a game as well. This choice to go in at Men-at-Arms, they're going to be very effective at this stage at completely tank sacred sites, while a bit more gambly ensures that Wam's game cannot come online if it works.
Oh, the Muslim, he got baited into this one so hard. Wanted to just stop the capture of the sacred site by the Scholar, but he didn't know the town center was there, and by the time he realized, he lost both of his scouts out there. Big hit in the stomach here.
Yeah, but he got what he needed out of that. He knows where to target next. He's prepping siege engineering, so this is going to be a push into the secondary TC. And honestly, it's up to 12 men-at-arms now. This is going to be a lot more effective than I think people would give it credit for at first.
Yeah, it could be intimidating. Like, he's mass committing to men-at-arms. Now, the biggest problem for Wam is that he doesn't have a straightforward answer to men-at-arms here. Mass archers in feudal are able to beat them. The problem is that you simply don't have time to mass those archers, and that is already a double Rax build. You have quite a lot of blacksmith upgrades as well. And this is where we kind of have to mention that this just showcases how bad the Minework Palace is. Even for a build like this one, the Aachen Chapel makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, the Minework makes no sense for when you get access to it. Like, the whole idea of cheaper like resource-intensive tech ups makes sense at higher scale. So it feels like the type of thing that pays for itself in tier 3 researchers, not in tier 1. I'm just never going to be a fan of Minework. I think it's a pile of trash.
Looks like the Men-at-Arms. Men-at-Arms are heading for a hunt. They probably were just probing that area. It's going to be a stable play from Wam. Problem here is that these horsemen won't trade that well against those men-at-arms, and it's not really a big deal for DeMuslim to mix in a couple of spearmen to help out.
Oh, Wam just revealed it as well. The fact he's got a scholar sitting there tells DeMuslim exactly what Wam's up to. He's Castle Age rushing.
Oh, yeah.
Timing could not be worse for him. 18 men-at-arms, a ram now built by DeMuslim and ready to breach that base. Remember that double stable investment? It's not about horsemen, it's about lancers, but he doesn't have access to them yet. He has to wait.
Yeah, he needs to wait. He's gonna just spend a bunch of resources going up to Castle Age with the House of Learning. It still will take some time for him to get up. And a bigger thing is that behind this one, the Muslim already is set up to deal with the Lancers. He has triple barracks worth of production. He can just pop out a couple more spearmen and buy himself a lot of time, while also pushing this expansion TC, and that's quite a lot of villagers exposed there.
Yeah, I think the Muslims should stop producing men-at-arms now and go for his tech up as well. This is still a healthy count, and when you arrive, you can get the upgrades, so they'll be effective against Lancers. But anyway, for now, men-at-arms are going to be diving in onto the extension TC. Will not take them long either between the torch damage and the rams. There's going to be a bye-bye baby to the extension for Wam. He got some value out of it in terms of villagers produced, but not the big healthy lead he was looking for. Villagers? Well, they know they're in a little bit of a pickle, so they might as well commit anyway. But this many men-at-arms, I mean, their damage actually adds up pretty quick.
Yeah, and they do have marching drills, so they could possibly catch up. It looks like the villagers will now make a run for it. Most of them will get away, so truth be told, you lose the town center, but at least you manage to save most of the villagers out there. I mean, given the circumstances, this is the best thing that Wam could hope for.
Yeah, you just have to think about it from a math standpoint. Like, how much did you invest in this TC? You've only got a 6-villager lead. You're still up against the HRE with 40% better gathering rate on most of their economy. Yeah, you are behind. Like, you're ahead in terms of tech up, but like in terms of raw economy, you feel behind.
Yeah, for sure. It's just the fact that, given the circumstances, this was his best tool to salvage the situation.
Oops. Oh, I thought he was going to go big brain there.
Whoop!
So, yeah, so DeMuslim missed the trick. If he garrisoned the men-at-arms in the ram, they couldn't be converted.
Could have been a nice move. Lancer's not popping out here, but this is the weakness here for Wam. He just got pushed away from those berries. He depleted his berries within his base, and the hunt is also denied. He doesn't have food. You want to push Lancers, congratulations, you need food for that. He's struggling to afford those Lancers.
Peasant Rebellion. They'll take out the 1 men-at-arms, but the problem is the larger quantity on the south side. I wouldn't be surprised there's a second wave coming in. DeMuslim has chosen to reinvest. You can actually see he hasn't gone for a tech up yet. He's still
can't.
T and feudal.
Look at that, 0 food per minute. He's just now making a transition to the hunt, and that's going to slow him down quite massively.
Scholar's tanky, but not tanky enough. Looks like he will be prevented from banking that extra relic. So Wam still waiting to bank 2. That free. It's so difficult with all these bad boys nearby. And the problem is their torch damage is still decent against your infrastructure in this area. You just need to get the initial troops out to hold, but as it stands, only 5 Lancers. It's not a quick way of getting rid of the MAA. Over the long term, it'll win. But
if DeMuslim gets a couple of spearmen out here, this is much more intimidating for Wam. He's still down to 50 food per minute. These men-at-arms are cutting him off from a lot of accessible food, really. If you mix in a couple of spears here, you can just deal with those knights, and then it's going to be very difficult for Wam to do anything and just get any kind of food.
And Dumu's Castle Age is on the way. He's about to get enough food for it. He'll begin the build up. Should be a Regnitz, and he'll have access to a decent amount of relics here. I say that. I think he's going to only have 2 left. Maybe not now. Yeah, it is. Okay. The problem is, I think, yeah, okay, so here's a big issue to consider. The easy relics for him got taken away. There's only 2 to the south side, and he's stuck camping them now. So he's got all these men-at-arms, but they don't serve a purpose anymore to the extent he was looking for. They're now guards. They're no longer raiders.
Yeah, keep in mind that he doesn't have a single scout, so he might not know that most of the relics that were accessible to him were yoinked by Wam. So at this point, he might still be saying, okay, I already have double barracks. Why would I go for a Burgrave Palace when I just want the extra economy from the Regnitz Cathedral? The problem is that, as you said, by the time he really gets those prelates out there, there will be no relics left. DeMuslim.
Oof, good enough damage. The wolf helped out there quite a bit. I've seen him more than before. Feels like that Scholar was not full health, actually. I think he'd been hit before because he should have 130 health, and his MAA don't hit that hard in feudal.
Yeah, they don't. And that's something that the Lancers will exploit as well. Some decent trades down to the south. Not so much to the north over here, running into the Spearman, but might still actually be able to stand and fight and take the win here, actually.
The Spearmen are meant to counter Knight. No, not in even numbers.
And not with an age difference. Those are still feudal age Spearmen.
Yep. The Muslim yet to upgrade them. Yet to bank his first relic. Frustrating opening to the castle age for him. Does feel like Wam is maybe a little bit better off as it stands.
And look at the follow-up now for Wam. He does have a powerful economy. He's got 2 relics right now operational, and he now captured all 3 sacred sites. He's got the mobility advantage too, and the problem for the Muslim is that he's trying to mirror him now. He tries to go for Lancers, but he's outnumbered 14-2.
Yeah, he's about to start playing the healing game from behind. It doesn't feel good anymore. Like, you let Wam escalate his healing first. So, if your plan is to go to your kind of atypical Castle Age, Mass Knights, Mass Prelate strat, you're going to be playing a weaker version of what Wam's doing. Even more so when you consider he went House of Learning, so he's going to have access to the Home Blades.
I think the plan falls apart when you say Mass Knights for the Muslim. Like, he's really struggling with numbers as compared to Wam.
He's struggling with food. He only has 1 farm at home. Like, where is he getting food long term? Like, this game might already just be over.
Yeah, he's going to struggle so much. It is 28 army against just 5 and no map control.
It's over, but the Muslim won't GG for another 20, 30 seconds until he sees all these Lancers. When he sees this many Lancers, he has no solution.
Yeah.
He's down to 3 spears. There's no way to hold.
And keep in mind, Wam behind this one, he has 3 sacred sites. At one point, you might have to decap those. Wam is mining stone. He's getting ready for a keep drop. Everything is set up for Wam to win this game. He's going to be on 4 relics too. And he's about to shatter the entire eco of the Muslim.
Yeah, I mean, if he gets spotted on that northern villager force that's going towards the berries, he will call GG straight away. It's the only reason he hasn't waved the flag yet, is he's hoping to get around there, but it's too little too late. GG gets called. Wam, good play here. The Muslim, it was an interesting experiment, but I think we're learning quickly that maybe the HRE castle rush is still the way.
Yeah, indeed, he tried to play this aggressive here, and he did some damage to the second TC, but he wasn't really able to avoid Wam capitalizing on that Castle Age timing, and then the relics just bought enough time for Wam to get the Lancer numbers up, clean up those men-at-arms. And from that point on, it was mobility advantage and just a big snowball. The Muslim had to play with pocket ecos, and he wasn't able to protect them. Convincing game number 1 here from Wam. He's going to take the win on Lipany.